Hey everyone, my name is Adi. In this video we will paint together a braid with acrylic. Before we begin, I want to talk about something that I think is very important: hair donations. So this is my hair. For the donation, the hair is braided and cut 30 centimeters long. Depending on the country, it might be a different length. I'm not sure about it. I will send it to an organization that creates wigs and gives them to sick children and women. I'm happy to see that hair donations become more and more popular. Actually, this is the third time I'm donating my hair, and every time it's exciting like the first time. If you consider donating your hair, or you know people who want to donate their hair, then I definitely recommend doing it. Okay, let's start painting. When painting with acrylic, it's better to start with the background. Use a big brush for that. In the previous tutorial about how to draw hair with charcoal, we talked about the fundamentals of drawing hair. This time we will take it to the next level. After the paint dries, I switch to a smaller brush and create a base layer with a dark brown. If you don't feel comfortable to paint with the brush right away, you can draw with something erasable first and add the paint later. I made a video about the stages of painting and one about copying plans. If you are interested, I'll put the links in the description of this video. The easiest way to paint the shape of the braid is to create a wavy line that looks like connected arches, and to do the same thing in the other side too. The braid is going to get thinner towards the end. The braid isn't symmetrical, so the arches in the left side aren't going to be on the same lines as the arches on the right side. In that painting, I painted the base layer with a darker color, a mixture of blue and brown that is very similar to black. But I felt that the base layer in the braid doesn't have to be that dark, because it doesn't have as much volume and depth. The hair is tied together. I prepare everything in advance. The palette with the colors, a jar of water, and a rug, an old shirt. I added to my palette a mixture of brown and blue for the darkest places. The darkest places in the braid are going to be in the connection points. They are the deepest and more hidden from the light. This time I kind of skip a stage and move from the background stage straight to the details. The braid is already defined and divided into small sections to begin with. In other cases, I think it's necessary to create divisions and define areas before switching to a tiny brush. Let's talk more about the colors, and we will talk about the technique afterwards. Do you remember what colors are mixed to create brown? Blue, red, and yellow, which are the three primary colors. Even if you don't mix colors and just use the paint from the tubes, knowing how a color is made is important for choosing the right shade. Browns have different amounts of blue, red and yellow. I use different browns to create different levels of lightness and darkness and variation in color. A brown that is more red, a brown that is more orange or yellow, yellow ochre, pale brown, a mixture of brown and white. That way the hair will look more realistic. If you try using one brown and add only black and white to it, the result will look dull, and it won't resemble the real hair, which is more colorful than what you might think at first glance. Do you remember that we talked about the black cat? When editing the photo with grayscale filter, the color changed, which means that the black wasn't only black, it has a touch of color in it. Black hair has a lot of blue in it. Make sure that you don't paint all the sections of the hair in the same way. The light falls differently on each section, and not all the hair is in the same color to begin with. The lower part of the hair was exposed to sunlight more, causing it to change color, and even in the upper part there is variation in color. Here, for example. When I look at the highlight, I see that it can be in different colors, more white or more yellow. The transition can be different too. Sometimes we will see more gradation, a smoother transition between the different levels of darkness, and sometimes it can go straight from light to dark. When you add the colors, I recommend that you will try one time to add the light colors first and the darker colors later, and in the other time to add the dark colors first and the light colors later, and see which way is easier for you, because it can feel different. The base color is dark, so the light colors that we add above it are easier to see, and they really stand out, whilst when adding the darker browns, the change isn't very dramatic. To decide where to place each color, just look closely and ask yourself questions. For example, where is the darkest area? Where are the highlights? What color is the highlight? And so on. I dip just the tip of the tiny brush and usually don't add water. There are cases when I do add water when painting with acrylic. If I want to create something transparent or to add color above a layer without covering it completely, like when creating halation effect, I also add water if the paint doesn't move smoothly. This can especially be in the way when you try to create accurate thin lines. So when adding the lines that go out of the braid, I will add water to the paint. Wet into wet technique, just as the name suggests, is adding wet paint over a wet paint. Unlike when adding color after the layer before is dried, when you use wet into wet technique, you can mix the colors that you placed with one another. The more you go with the brush over a wet area, the more the colors will mix with each other. So it can be useful to create gradation within something. Just like we went with the blending stamp over the lines in the previous video to make the line change its color and not to be the same all the way. I use the rag to wipe off paint from the brush in these cases. If I took too much paint, having extra paint can make it hard to paint thin lines. After cleaning the brush, to remove leftovers of paint and water. And after painting with one color over another wet color, wet into wet, the colors get mixed on the brush, and if you keep using the brush like that, it can lead to muddy colors, colors that aren't pure. If you are using oil colors instead of acrylic, I recommend to use a brush for each color, just like we did in the video about the fabric and the one about the apple, and to clean the brushes after you end your painting session. If you continue to paint for several days and you don't want the paint on the palette to dry, you can cover the palette with bag and put it in a cooler box with ice. If you want to use oil colors instead, you can find explanations about how to clean the brushes and how to make a color transparent in other videos that I made. Depending on how the surroundings look like, the hair can look flat in photos, without all the different levels of lightness and darkness and details that exist in real life. So you might need to add things for your imagination when drawing hair from a photo. The lines aren't going to be all in the same length. The lines go into slightly different directions, but they are all going to look curvy. While these lines are still wet, I use brown to blend them in a bit, so they will feel more connected. The sections are getting smaller towards the end, and the further down, the more the brown of the hair looks yellow. I add yellow diluted with water over some of the shiny places. I will continue the hair after adding the shadow that the braid cast. Adding the shadow helps us to understand where the braid is located. It's not floating in the air. Braid that isn't connected to a head and floating in the air sounds like something out of a horror movie, doesn't it? Adding the shadow also helps to make the painting more realistic. It creates dimension. The shadow has the same wavy shape as the braid. The width of the shadow changes. It's not going to be always the same. I will add the lines that go out of the hair after making the shadow, because they cover the shadow. In the lower part that isn't braided, I see many lines going out of the group of hair. When I created the base layer, I painted this part in a general shape. Now I will take the time to paint it more accurately. In this part I see more yellow than before. The color is lighter. It was exposed to sunlight the longest time. I add a bit of water to the paint to make the paint in the brush flow better when creating the lines of the hair that goes out of the shape. This part is much messier than the braid, where most of the hair is tucked in. The lines can go to different directions. I'll add the rubber band later because it covers the hair. It's above the hair. The lines that go out of the hair look dark, but I can also see lighter lines like these. Moving on to the rubber band. When creating pink, use a bit of red and more white. I create more than one tone in advance. When I create the tutorials, I remove the original sound of the video, but this time I wanted to keep a part of the background sounds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not Dr. Dolittle, but I think that the reason the pigeon was so persistent is because the pigeon wanted to be part of this video. Mission accomplished. Anyway, the rubber band is wider than the hair, and it has light and shadow like everything else. The center is lighter, and the upper part and the lower part are darker, because it has a round shape. It's not flat, so the elevated part is more exposed to light. The rubber band casts shadow on the hair. This rubber band also has texture, so I add dots. There are lines of single hair that come out from between the rubber band. If you have leftovers of paint, you can use them for sketching. After you finish, make sure that you clean your brushes properly so they won't get ruined. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you know more people who might be interested in this video, please share it with them. Next time we will do something different. See you soon. Bye bye.